All right, thank you for coming. My name is Donald Thomas. I'm a professional communications minor from Siena Heights University. And today we're going to talk about intercultural communication. So, good first. Sorry.
New battery.
All right, so today we'll discuss what intercultural communication is, the communication and cultural complexities of intercultural communication, the biggest barrier to intercultural communication, and strategies for effective intercultural communication. So when we talk about what intercultural communication is, it's something that we accomplish every day. When you wake up in the morning, when you leave the house, if you're doing your chores, intercultural communication is something that we do. I do it every day in my house, right? You do it when you come to work. You do it when you're running errands. You do it when you're running chores. But the whole point is your intercultural communication effective? Are the messages that you're expressing to people who are different cultures from you, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, effective? And that's what we're going to talk about. So the technical definition of intercultural communication is the effective transmission of messages and priorities from members of one culture to another. So we think about, again, effective transmission. We can talk to people, but most of the times we're talking at them. Is that effective? We know the difficulties that we have in just speaking to people in general who may have the same cultures as we do. But when we talk about effective transmission, it's, are you understanding what I'm saying to you? Is this a message that you're understanding as I send this message out? And are you receiving this message in the intent in which it was initially sent out? So, again, we know that this happens with each and every one of us each day. Okay, within our job profession, as inspectors, we already have to talk about extremely technical things, right? So as we attempt to explain these technical things to the people that we encounter on a day-to-day basis, we know that there are barriers to effective communication on that level. So when we think about our communication to people of different culture and backgrounds, we have to make sure that we are getting our message across effectively. So in order to understand intercultural communication within itself, we must understand culture, backgrounds, ethnicities, and then understand communication as a whole. And understand what our main goals are when we're speaking to people in general. The communication goals within intercultural communication is only one. It's shared meaning. So when we talk about what shared meaning is, the definition in the professional communication world is when two people are in agreement on the meaning of an event, message, or experience. So what I say to Joseph, does he understand what my intent of what my message is? Are we in agreement with the message that I'm presenting to him? If we're not in agreement, then shared meaning wasn't achieved. We haven't had an effective transmission of the messages that we're sending and receiving. So if we understand that achieving shared meaning is critical, we're looking at not only is achieving shared meaning critical for people that we talk to of our same culture, but when we're dealing with people who are different cultures or ethnic backgrounds from what we have to work hard at making sure that that meaning or that agreement between the two people that we're talking to, that is there, that is present. So you look at how complex different cultures are, and you look at about that communication as a whole. So one thing that most people need to understand is that culture is just more than skin color. People automatically associate, well, culture with the tone of our skin. But now, let's think about it. So in Europe, you have Caucasians. You may generally associate that with one particular culture, but that's incorrect. Because the ethnic heritage and background of a person from Ireland or England is definitely different than someone from the Netherlands. It's definitely different from someone from Germany to someone from Russia. So looking at skin color as a whole, as what we consider culture, is short-sighted. Similarly, if we look at the continent of Africa, the culture, the skin color, the tone of people from Africa, from North Africa, what they do might be different than somebody from South Africa. So looking at culture, or making a connection between culture and skin color, is short-sighted. So moving from there, we look at how different cultures communicate, and this is critical to effective communication or shared meaning. Most cultures communicate, some cultures rather communicate non-verbally, meaning through gestures and eye contact. And within those certain cultures, some cultures it's disrespectful to make direct eye contact when you're speaking to someone. In some cultures it's disrespectful, or they become easily offended if you encroach upon them or violate that personal space. These are all things that we need to understand when we're communicating, because if they're offended or confused, then no shared meaning is accomplished. They immediately shut down and nothing that you're saying is really being taken in. When you think about cultures that prefer face-to-face communication, within our culture traditionally, meaning the United States, we're an individualistic country, meaning that a lot of the things that we attempt to do is based upon individual achievements, goals, and things like that. Where there might be some teamwork involved, we're considered an individualistic country. Whereas in Japan, it's a collective country. Everything that they do is working together, they do things together, everyone's viewed on the same plane. So you can see where the communication problems would probably be if you have someone from the United States and you have someone from Japan. Whereas we may not prefer face-to-face communication, we might not prefer face-to-face communication. The person from Japan might prefer it that way. So how do we accomplish shared meaning if we don't understand what those cultural differences are? There's no way we can really accomplish that. So when you think about those particular barriers that I talked about, the gestures and different things like that, linguistic barriers, that's a small portion of some of the issues that you might have with intercultural communication. But quite honestly, when you talk about the barriers to effective intercultural communication, you're the biggest barrier to effective intercultural communication. You are. So when I say that you're the, see that thing? You're the biggest, me, we're our own worst enemies when it comes to effective intercultural communication. So what I mean by that is ethnocentrism, okay? So if you look at the definition, there's two: the belief in the inherent superiority of one's own ethnic group or culture, and a tendency to view different groups or cultures from the perspective of one's own. So inherently, what that definition is saying is that inherently we think that the way that we do things within our own certain culture is superior or better than someone else's. Inherently. And a lot of times that has to do with the fact that we don't know anything about that culture. We haven't taken the time to learn about that particular culture. So automatically we default to thinking that what we do is better in this culture than someone else's. That goes along with the tendency to view different groups of cultures from the perspective of one's own. We'll compare how we do things with another culture. It's short-sighted. In order to be effective in our communication, we have to realize that our culture is no different than anyone else's. Okay? So when we're thinking about being effective, accomplishing that shared meaning, having effective transmissions, we have to think about what strategies that we can have for effective intercultural communication. This was for Justin. So let's talk about some of those strategies. We have to building self-awareness.
That was very ethnocentric of you.
Thank you. We have to build self-awareness. Building self-awareness is getting outside of your own box, okay? You have to learn or have an interest in learning more about just what you're accustomed to within your particular culture, within your particular group. There are thousands and thousands of different cultures. Now we're talking about specifically within this country. Just within this country, we may not have immigrants or people migrating to this country. Just the different type of cultures that we have within this country can cause barriers to form when we're attempting to have communication. The other big thing is that we got to avoid stereotyping. The honest truth is that we all stereotype. But think about the effect that stereotyping has on communication as a whole. You've already diminished your ability to communicate effectively just from the fact that you've already got a predetermined viewpoint of that person in your head. And think within yourself, once you begin stereotyping, is your message going to come out effectively? Are they going to pick up on your body language and say, well, I'm not listening to this person. I have no interest in what they're saying. So avoiding stereotyping is another big thing. We got to think twice about what we're talking about. Think twice about what we say to people from different cultures. And that kind of leans back to ethnocentrism. We have to understand that certain things are a certain way, and that's okay. Listen actively, meaning focusing on the things that the people are saying to you, people from different cultures, what they're saying to you specifically. Are you listening to hear them? Are you listening just to kind of get them out of the way or move along? You have to actively listen to the things that they're saying in order to be effective with your communication. Being flexible. Being flexible means taking the time out to learn more about different cultures. We engage every day with different cultures in our workplace. So in order to effectively get across our messages, we've got to be flexible enough to learn about the people that we're engaged with every day that we're at work and at home and in any other engagements. And finally, the biggest thing is that respect differences. You don't have to necessarily draw on or grasp to a specific type of culture. But you have to respect the differences that we encounter on a day-to-day basis with the people that we meet from different cultures. And respecting the differences means respecting that person. And that ultimately means getting away from stereotyping. We have to respect the people that we encounter on a day-to-day basis who may not look, sound, or act like us, and respect them as individuals. And that takes empathy. We have to show empathy towards the people that we encounter who are different from our own culture. So in conclusion, effective intercultural communication is hard work. It's something that you have to decide to do. It's not easy. You have to take it upon yourself to decide that you're going to be a more effective communicator with people who are outside of your culture, people who don't share the same culture as you do. You have to decide to communicate better. And so ultimately, if you keep shared meaning in mind as a goal, it'll help in the end with intercultural communication. So I'd like to thank you for taking this time to listen to me, and I appreciate everything that you guys have done for me over this course of time. Thanks.